Welcome to Healing Out Loud with Gina Lynn. This is a space for honest conversations about neurodivergence, trauma, healthcare, advocacy, and healing. If you've ever felt dismissed, misunderstood, or alone in your experience, you're in the right place. Thank you for being here. Let's start healing out loud together. Today, for this first episode, I want to start with something that I think so many of us live with, but do not always have the words for. Why is it so hard to explain how we feel? Why is it that sometimes we know something's wrong? We know we're overwhelmed. We know something feels off in our body, or in our mind, or in our nervous system. And when it's time to explain it to somebody else, especially under pressure, the words just don't come out right. This experience is so real. And for a lot of neurodivergent people and for a lot of trauma survivors, it's not a small thing. It affects everyday life. It affects relationships. It affects healthcare. It affects how we see ourselves. Because when you cannot clearly explain your experience, people often misunderstand you. And when people misunderstand you often enough, shame starts creeping in. You start thinking, maybe the problem's you. Maybe you are too much. Maybe you're too emotional. Maybe you're too scattered. Maybe you're overreacting. Maybe if you were calmer, smarter, more organized, less sensitive, more put together, you could explain yourself better. But I want to begin here. I do not think that struggling to explain yourself always means you do not know what you are feeling. Sometimes it means there's too much happening inside all at once. Sometimes it means your body knows before your words do. Sometimes it means your nervous system gets overloaded. Sometimes it means you're trying to speak through fear, shutdown, confusion, old trauma, sensory overload, or dissociation. And of course, that affects language. For many of us, the problem is not that there's nothing there to say. The problem is what's happening inside does not always translate neatly into words on demand. Because so much of life depends on being able to explain yourself. What do you need? What are your feelings? What hurts? What happened? What do you mean? Why are you upset? Can you be more specific? When did it start? How does it feel like? Can you give me an example? Those questions may sound simple from the outside, but when your mind is racing, or you are overwhelmed, or your body is activated, or you are already feeling misunderstood, those questions can feel enormous. Sometimes your mind goes blank. Sometimes you know what you mean, but your mouth says it wrong. Sometimes you say part of the truth, but not the whole truth. Sometimes you leave out the most important detail because you do not realize it matters until later. Sometimes you sound calm when you're not calm. Sometimes you sound emotional when what you are saying is still true. Sometimes you talk in circles because everything feels connected and you don't know how to separate it into neat little pieces for another person. And if this happens to you over and over and over again, you may have learned to distrust yourself. You may have learned to think, I'm bad at explaining things. Maybe that is true in some situations. Maybe some of us really do struggle with communication. I know that can be true. But that's not the same thing as saying there is no reason for it. There are reasons communication gets hard. There's reasons words disappear under stress. There's reasons that people who are intelligent, thoughtful, observant, and deeply self-aware can still fall apart when trying to explain something vulnerable, painful, or overwhelming. And one of those reasons is being neurodivergent. A lot of neurodivergent people do not process information in a straight, tidy line. Sometimes we process in layers. Sometimes we feel everything at once. And then we have to work backward to figure out what it all means. Sometimes we're trying to sort through physical sensations, thoughts, emotions, memories, sensory input. That's a lot. And then on top of that, you add trauma. Trauma changes things too. Trauma can make your system go into fight, flight, freeze, fawn, shut down, or numbness. Trauma can make it hard to feel safe enough to even know what you feel in the moment. Oh, trauma, it can make you second guess yourself, It can make you speak too fast or not at all. It can make you minimize. It can make you over-explain. It can make you leave out details because some part of you is trying to protect you. And so when neurodivergent and trauma overlap, it can become very hard to communicate clearly under pressure. Not because you have nothing to say, but because too much is happening inside at once. And I think many of us have spent years being judged only by what shows up on the outside. People hear us hesitate, they hear us backtrack, they hear us get emotional, they hear us miss details, they hear us struggle to be a liner. And from that, they assume we are confused, unreliable, dramatic, or unclear. But what they often do not see is how hard we're working internally just to stay with the conversation. They do not see the panic. They don't see the sensory overload. They do not see the younger hurt parts getting triggered. They do not see the part of us trying not to cry. They do not see the part of us trying to make it make sense. They do not see the part of us desperately to say it in a way that will make someone understand. And this is the one reason I really want to bring internal family systems, or IFS, into this podcast. Because IFS gives me language for something that I think a lot of people already know in their body, even if they've never had words for it. We are not always operating from one single steady place. Sometimes one part of us is scared. Another part of us is trying to stay in control. Another part's angry. Another part is ashamed. Another part is trying to be agreeable. Another part's trying to keep the peace. Another part's overwhelmed. Another part is trying to sound smart enough or calm enough or clear enough to be taken seriously. And when all of that is happening at once, communication can get hard real fast. That does not mean you are fake. It does not mean you're making it up. And it does not mean that you're unstable. It means there are multiple things happening inside you at the same time. And suddenly, instead of asking, "What's wrong with me?" we can start asking, "What's happening inside of me right now?" And that's a very different question. It's a kinder question. And I think it leads to better understanding. Maybe the overwhelming part is taking over. Maybe the people-pleasing part is afraid you will upset somebody. Maybe the scared younger part's feeling exposed. Maybe the part that learned not to trust others is holding back details. Maybe the protector part is trying to shut the whole thing down because it does not feel safe. This makes sense to me. It makes sense that words get harder when safety gets lower. It makes sense that people who have to work hard just to survive do not always sound polished when they're trying to explain pain. And I think this matters especially in healthcare, because healthcare often asks people to do something very difficult. It asks you to notice what's happening in your body, to organize it, explain it clearly, remember the details, answer questions quickly, stay regulated, advocate for yourself, and do it all while possibly being sick, scared, overstimulated, and or in pain. That's a lot to ask of anybody. And for neurodivergent people and trauma survivors, it can be especially hard. This is not about blaming the provider. This is not about saying healthcare workers are bad people. It's about recognizing that communication can break down when two people are speaking from very different experiences. A provider may be listening for certain key details in a certain order, and the patient may be trying to explain something from inside overwhelm. The provider may want clean, fast, direct answers, and the patient may need more time, more questions, more safety, more space, or a different way of explaining it altogether. And if nobody understands that mismatch, the patient can end up feeling dismissed, and the provider may end up missing what the patient was truly trying to say. That is one reason I care so much about communication. Not because I think everything is someone else's fault, not because I think the answer is to shame ourselves into becoming better performers, but because I think understanding how our minds and nervous system works can help us communicate more effectively. And I also think compassion helps. Shame does not usually make people communicate better. Shame makes people tighter. It makes people more self-conscious, more frozen, more scrambled, more likely to second guess every single word, more likely to leave the conversation feeling worse than when they started. But compassion creates room. Compassion says, let me slow down. Compassion says, I know I'm having trouble finding words. Compassion says, something important is happening here, even if I cannot explain it perfectly yet. Compassion says, let me try it again. And sometimes that's what healing looks like. Not perfect words, not instant clarity, not becoming a different person overnight, but learning how to stay with ourselves long enough to understand what we mean. Learning how to pause, learning how to come back, learning how to say, that's not exactly what I meant, let me say it another way. Learning how to notice when a scared part or an overwhelmed part has stepped in. Learning how to work with ourselves instead of against ourselves. That matters so much. Because a lot of us has lived with the belief that if we just tried harder, we would somehow become easier to understand. And maybe efforts matter. Of course it does. But effort without understanding can turn into self-attack. And it can become, why can't I just say this right? Why am I like this? Why do I always mess this up? Why can't I just be normal? And I do not think that helps. I think what helps is curiosity. What happens to me when I'm overwhelmed? What happens to my words when I feel unsafe? Do I go blank? Do I talk too much? Do I minimize? Do I fawn? Do I become unable to organize what I know? Do I need more time before I can explain something well? Do I explain something better in writing than in speaking? Do I need notes? Do I do better when someone asks gentle questions instead of rapid-fire questions? Those kind of questions can change everything. Because once you understand your patterns, you can begin to work with them. Maybe you do need to write things down before appointments. I do. Maybe you do need a list. Maybe you do need more processing time. I do. Maybe you do need to tell people, I know what I'm trying to say, but I need a minute to get there. Maybe you do need to come back later when your nervous system is calmer. It's not a weakness. That is self-understanding. And I want to say something else too. Just because you struggle to explain something clearly in the moment does not mean what you're experiencing is not real. A tangled explanation does not always mean a false experience. We feel like this because of how we're treated when they don't understand how we're communicating. Emotional language does not always mean an exaggerated experience. Confusion in expression does not always mean confusion in reality. Sometimes it simply means translation is hard. And if you've spent years being doubted, dismissed, corrected, talked over, let me tell you, that can make translation even harder because now you're not only trying to explain yourself, but you're trying to explain yourself while anticipating not being believed, not being understood, not being able to find the right words. And let me tell you what, that is freaking exhausting. And I think a lot of people carry that exhaustion quietly. They carry the exhaustion of trying to make themselves understandable enough for others. And maybe that's why this matters so much to me. Because I know what it's like to want something so badly, to explain something accurately and still feel like what comes out is not enough. I know what it's like to feel something strongly and still not know how it is to organize it into words fast enough to get it out for that moment. I know what it's like to realize afterwards what I wish I'd said and how I know I'm not the only one. That's part of why I wanted to start this podcast. I want there to be a space for people like us, people whose inner world is real, even when it's hard to describe, people whose nervous systems make sense, even when they're misunderstood, people who are tired of seeing every struggle turned into a personal flaw, people who want language, not shame, people who want understanding, not blame, People who want to heal without having to pretend their experience is simpler than it really is. So if that's you, I hope this podcast feels like a place where you can exhale a little. I hope it feels like a place where your experience is allowed to be complex. I hope it feels like a place where you can talk honestly about neurodivergence, trauma, protective parts, overwhelm, communication, and healing. Because I really believe healing begins with understanding. Not perfect understanding, not instant understanding, but, enough understanding to stop attacking ourselves for the way we learn to survive. Enough understanding to notice what's happening inside us, inside our bodies. Enough understanding to become more compassionate with the parts of us that are trying so hard. And enough understanding to begin finding better ways to speak up, to ask for what we need, and to advocate for ourselves. So that's where I want to begin, with this truth. A lot of neurodivergent people with trauma struggle to explain what they feel. That struggle is real, and it's painful, and it can affect every part of life. But it makes sense. And the more we understand why, and the less shame has to run the show, that's when our healing begins. Thank you for spending this time with me today. I hope something in this episode helped you feel seen, understood, or a little less alone. Your voice matters. Your experience matters. And you deserve to be heard. Until next time, take gentle care of yourself, and let's keep healing out loud, together.